Thank you very much. And it was a pleasure listening to the Walmart presentation, and in terms of what they're doing, seems like very good work on the real-time processing side. I think what I'm going to do in the next 15 minutes is try to talk a little bit about the platforms that typically power such implementations, like what was being talked about before. And I'll try to cover multiple aspects of it, right? One, with all of these platforms, there's a thing about scale. So I'll try to cover how scale is handled. I'll also give a little bit of the real-time flavor, since this is the piece around real-time. And then hybrid, which to us is important to a lot of customers as we go and talk to them about what they need in their data platform. Sorry, there is a chat here. Okay, perfect. All right, so let's go back here. Perfect. Okay, so just a little bit about me. I have been with Actian for 2 years, and I lead strategy, but I also am the general manager for our cloud data warehouse offering. Prior to Actian, I've kind of done a lot of things in the industry. I've been, I was in R&D before at Sun Microsystems and Apple, then moved to management consulting, did that for 3 years, learned a lot about how to do business, then spent time with HPE, and now trying to be with the product vendor and trying to see how we can innovate in the data warehousing space. So let's get into it. Actually, before I get into it, just a quick thing on Actian. We're not that well known around, but essentially, as a company, we have existed for about 30 plus years, have a pretty decent customer base in the large enterprise space, as well as the smaller customers. But the company is built pretty much around data platforms, databases to be fair, along with some data integration technology, and a lot of patents and a lot of innovation that comes with it, and a good number of names. And I'll talk about some of these examples that we go into as we go into the concepts here. So let's start with data warehousing, right? And to me, data warehouse has now evolved into data platforms, but still the concept stays. If we start from where it all began, and for me, that is like, late 90s, early 2000s, pretty much all the data warehouses were being run on an appliance type box, right? Or boxes, to be fair. They were all MPP, and Exadata, which is from Oracle, Netezza, which is from IBM now, and Teradata were kind of the three players that dominated the space, right? And all with appliances, because for running analytics, and especially if you're trying to run analytics on, at that time, probably millions and hundreds of millions of rows, now it's billions and trillions of rows, you need a lot of compute power to go through that, right? And so that model was right, but these boxes tended to be expensive. There was, limitations around scalability, et cetera, and pretty much everything was on-prem at that time. Earlier this decade, kind of when you get into the cloudification of the world mode, the first entry in this space was Redshift, which essentially was the same concept, except that it was running on commodity hardware and now offered as part of AWS, right? So essentially, this is AWS's own offering in the data warehouse space. Good stuff. Everything was now offered where you could kind of literally pay by the node. The cost came down. But still, the concept was very similar to how you were buying appliances before. Snowflake came in, I would say, really 2016, 2017 timeframe, wherein they came up with the innovation of separation of compute and storage, wherein now you could literally store hundreds of terabytes or petabytes of data, and the compute could stay small or large based on what you really need the compute for, right? So there was a separation that got created, which essentially meant I'm not paying, $30,000 per terabyte anymore. I'm only paying, $1,000 per terabyte, but I'm paying separately for compute, which can be a few thousands, or it may be hundreds of thousands, depending upon what I'm running there. Right? So it basically gave user a lot more power. Obviously, it's on the cloud, so you have that, per hour pricing and everything going with it. Obviously, the incumbents were not to be left behind. They all came up with their cloud offering. Teradata has their own Teradata Vantage, for example. But all of them suffer from the thing of what they were attempting to do was take what they had on-prem and try to put it in the cloud, which didn't really go well with the innovation that was being created in the market. And where kind of Redshift and Snowflake suffer is they have been cloud only, and literally while they're great for the cloud, a lot of the data is still sitting on-prem, right? I would say in some of the surveys that we have done, and I have some slides if we have time to go through them, would be it's like 70% of the data is still sitting on-prem. And even though everybody has a strategic direction to move to the cloud, that will take over the next 3, 5, maybe even 10 years as we go over there, right? So what happens in the meantime? I still need something to solve on-prem if my application that are producing and consuming the data are sitting on-prem. And I do want to move to the cloud for any application that has moved to the cloud already, right? So how do you solve for that? So Actian essentially, when we went into data warehousing, this was our design point, right? So how do we solve for both sides of the equation? Because as we went and talked to a lot of our larger customers, this was the problem that they're trying to solve, right? They love the idea of separation of compute and storage. They love the idea of paying per hour. They love the idea of running on commodity hardware instead of on appliances, but they don't want to have different technologies in different places. So what we've done is we have basically taken the same technology. It's a very, very high performance data warehouse that I'll talk about in a few minutes, but we have made it hybrid. And we have not only made it such that it's the same database, same physical models, et cetera, on-prem as well as in AWS and Azure. What we are also doing is trying to find a way to connect the data together, because ultimately, to be true hybrid, you need that federated data concept to be brought into force. So I'll talk about some of those aspects as we go along, and obviously happy to answer questions afterwards. Just a quick kind of intro to what we have as a product. Essentially, it's a hybrid cloud data warehouse. It's called Avalanche, launched March of last year. So we are about a year in now. We started off on AWS, then rolled it on to Azure, and then since then have added a bunch of features to it, right? So we are sort of getting into that decent maturity level at this point. The biggest thing for us at design point has always been performance, because ultimately, by extracting as much performance as we can from a commodity hardware like x86, Intel and AMD CPUs, you can basically do more for the same resource. And ultimately, since you're paying for the resource at the end of the day, the more you can do with it means the more reports you can bang out, you can get the millisecond responses that we were seeing in the previous presentation. All of that at a very low price point, because we can do more with less, right? So the idea being high performance, hybrid deployment, which we just talked about. I'll get it a little bit into the out-of-the-box connectivity, because that is important with any data platform. If you can't get data into it, Kafka is a great way for getting real-time data into it. So we do connect with Kafka, but then not all data is real-time as well, right? So you want near real-time data, you want near real-time data, wherein an event happened and I want it to reflect in my data warehouse so that it can be now used for either complex event processing or for reporting and all of that, right? So freshness of data being maintained, I need connectors and I need all that ETL and ELT to happen as close to real time as possible. And so we help enable that, obviously all of that with low cloud economics. Now, before I get into the product and technology some more, just a quick example on one of our customers who's using us for I would say it's a fairly real-time use case, because essentially what they do, so AA is, it's an equivalent to AAA in the UK, right? So it's the same thing. They provide kind of auto services, and they also have an insurance arm similar to AAA in the US, right? And what they use us for is essentially when you go price shopping for an insurance quote, you're going to these third-party websites that are acting as aggregators in that space. You're saying, okay, this is my characteristics. I have this car, this model, blah, blah, blah. This is where I live, because that matters a lot to the insurance guys, because it affects the crime rates, etc. And you are sending that data back to through the third-party aggregator to AA here, who then has to respond back with, okay, for this characteristic, this is what will be my tentative code. And obviously, it's based on a lot of, ultimately, there's validation and all that needs to happen. But to calculate that in real time, as soon as this comes in, a response is expected in less than a second to that website. Essentially, what they're doing is they're doing fairly complex analysis, and part of it is also looking for fraud, right? Fraud is a big word, but essentially what you're looking for is people basically, using their grandma's zip code just because that's a better neighborhood, and hence they'll get a lower rate. So all the data sets that they have in the background, they have built models around it, similar to what we heard before. And what they're doing with us is essentially we are acting as a platform that's kind of churning through those models in real time and coming out with an answer that can be fed back to the third-party website, in that sub-second sort of time frame, right? And that's where performance matters. And that's where for AA, it's like, if you don't return back in 3 seconds or 4 seconds, whatever, you are literally going to lose the business because you're never going to show up as a response on that website. So that's really the power of performance and the real-time capability that we bring to the table. And we'll kind of, this is just one of those examples, and there are kind of other customers as well, several in financial space and some in kind of transportation logistics space as well that leverage us in this way. Okay, so with that example in mind, right? So let's just get a little bit into the product side. What this brings to the table, essentially at the core, it is an MPP relational database. Sorry. We have separated compute and storage. You have dynamic elasticity, etc. Fully SQL compliant. So you will kind of, we have a large base of people who know SQL. So it perfectly fits with that. We work with both structured and semi-structured data, and with all the security bits on the left side. The right side, I will not go deeper into them, but essentially those are all the different bits that we have done to get that performance out of the system, right? So things like vectorized processing being key there, things around being CPU cache centric, right? Which again goes back to my thing of how do we derive every last ounce of juice from that x86 processor is done by making all the execution happen in the CPU cache, right? And that's kind of major innovation that we bring to the table here. We are columnar, so are many other data warehouses. So no big deal in that, but columnar by itself does help a lot on analytics. It helps a lot with compression as well. And we use some standard compression as well as our own compression algorithms to ensure that data is compressed pretty much all throughout the pipeline. So a lot of innovation going into this, but ultimately the result is this, right? Which is essentially, we pretty much beat the competition out there by a factor of 10, right? In this particular benchmark, it's 9x. The numbers vary. I've seen numbers sometimes, 6, 7x, sometimes, 20, 30x. But yeah, a good thing is that there is an order of magnitude difference in terms of what we can do with the same resource pool, at the same kind of price point, versus what our competition out there can do with that, right? And the way we have designed our system, we kind of love concurrency, which comes with most enterprise workloads. And we scale very well with that. Whereas, if you look at some of the other products in the market, you literally have to spin up new warehouses every time you go kind of be on a concurrency of 8 or 10 or something in that domain. Now, that's performance. Performance is good. Performance can be traded off with price, so that's good too. But really, where customers ultimately latch onto us is because of the fact that we are hybrid. And this was a survey that I was talking about before, which we did about, I think this was last year, wherein pretty much everybody still has a lot of data on-prem, and that is what they're expecting to continue, that even if we move, it'll take us 3 to 5 years. So what we have done here is we are enabling you with an on-prem as well as a public or private cloud solution. But the bigger bit here is the federated query thing, which is where we basically, let's just go with an example wherein, assuming that you have data sitting in the US on the right side, and that's in a cloud data warehouse, you're accessing it through some tool, let's say Power BI in this case. And then you have some data which has GDPR constraints that's sitting in an EMEA data set, and that shouldn't leave really, that side. But now I'm sitting at the corporate headquarters and I want to figure out how do I kind of query both sets, right? It's good the regional teams are doing what they're doing, but I want to be able to query both of them. So what this federated query engine is able to do is to take that. We have a cost-based optimizer sitting in the middle that also knows the constraints that, where data should be moved, where it shouldn't be moved, etc. It's going to divide up the query fragments, push it out, compute where it can on the individual sites, and where it can't, it will then do the aggregation as well. So if the joins, for example, have to happen on the EMEA side only because the EMEA data cannot come out from there, it'll push the join over to the EMEA side. And then ultimately give back the aggregate result. So that's kind of our way of being truly hybrid and going one step further than what everybody else is doing, and being able to give people not only different platforms, but also give the technology on that side. The third bit here is essentially around ingestion, and that comes to the real-time aspects. We do connect to a lot of SaaS applications. You can pull data from S3, ADLS. Obviously, those are data lakes or the modern data lakes, so to speak. But we also have connectors to Kafka. We're building connector to RabbitMQ, etc. The whole idea being, let's enable data to come in fresh real time. Avalanche has the capability of being updated in real time. We have patented technology that allows you to update a columnar store, which not every columnar store can handle that. And we do that without losing performance. So literally, your data comes in and it can be fed into Avalanche in near real time. And now you're able to kind of run your query, incorporating that data, within seconds, so to speak. And then the last bit, we talked about this before, that there's a major TCO aspect of performance, that this is just a flip side of that, wherein we can kind of go in significantly lower than pretty much what our competition can. All right, so I know I had only 15 minutes. I don't know if I took more than that, but summarizing what we bring to the table, essentially high performance, hybrid deployment, and with the new federated query mechanism, that essentially changes the game on the hybrid side. Very low TCO, and then comprehensive integration, including the real-time sort of Kafka integration that allows you to do more fresh on this thing. So I'm going to stop here and pass it back to the organizing team here.
Okay. Thank you so much. And let me remind the audience that if you have a question, enter it into the Q&A box so that we can ask our speakers. So I've got a question here for Navinder. How do you link different IDs, and why is that necessary? Why do you need to do that?
Thanks, Mary. Great question. So basically the USP of Walmart, if you look at it, like we have 11,000 stores and we are just growing our footprint into the e-commerce domain. So what we want to do is leverage omni-channel experience a lot. Like nowadays, if you see, like the grocery shopping has become so easy because you get it delivered to your home from Walmart, or you can just order it and then go and pick up at the Walmart store. Or even if like you order it while sitting at home and in an hour and go, and there will be an associate with some bags outside the Walmart so that you can just go and pick it up. So what we want to do is basically having this omni-channel experience, use that a lot to our advantage with respect to our customers, because we are far ahead in the retail domain more than them. So basically, like whenever a customer goes into a Walmart store and he buys something, we would want to retain that information that this particular person goes and buys something on Walmart store as well, so that when he comes back online, and even if we try to push him towards the online, that we have a Walmart site as well and you can shop online as well, we have that information about the customer that he goes and buys this stuff online, offline actually in the stores. So rather than just relating these IDs real time on the e-commerce side, we also have this notion of customer offline. So we want to have that particular whole superset of information about the customer online and offline, that we can have use that better to our advantage and have that complete information available to our models. So that is on the why part, and how is actually we are actually using union shuffle algorithm. It actually links. It's a graph algorithm which links different nodes, and then like one of the patents which we were talking about earlier is on this particular real-time linking part. And what we do is like we send all the events to Kafka, and in that particular event we have all the BTCs, VTCs, all the cookies for a particular customer along with this customer ID. So we know that this particular customer is related to this cookie as well. So that whenever he logs into with a different user ID, we know that this particular customer's IDs, all these three IDs are actually linked. So we use these to advantage and try to link them in real time whenever query comes, and we can serve all the data for a particular customer.
I'm assuming that because of the health crisis, because of COVID, that the whole e-commerce business of Walmart grew considerably. Did that affect how you're using Kafka and all of the other things that you're doing?
Yeah, like interestingly, like there are some comments about it that we could not have grown this much in years what we have done in last 1 quarter. So in last 1 quarter itself, Walmart e-commerce business grew 75%. And
Wow.
the scale with which Walmart is right now, you can imagine how much 75% of that actually is. So there's a lot of huge traffic. So we had to actually increase cluster sizes to be accustomed to this new traffic which is coming in from different sources. But yeah, like it's been like, apart from all these gloom, this has been good news for us.
Exciting times, I guess. We have a question here for Vikas. Is there an Avalanche performance demo running around someplace?
Absolutely. There are several on our website. What is the best way to get it out to people? I mean, I can send a link over to you, Meridi, or I can.
How long is your link? We could put it in the chat box if it's not too long.
Yeah, let me go look up for it, and I'll get it.
Oh, you have to go look it up. Well,
let me go find it. Yeah, it's there on the website, so I just need to pick it up from there.
Which is Actian.com.
Yeah. Right, so I'll why don't you go to the next question, and I'll in the meantime look up the thing and put it in the chat box here.
Okay. Okay. Navinder, could you talk just a little bit more about the process you go through with data cleaning? That seems to be an issue.
Yeah. So great question. So basically what we have currently is we have a batch pipeline as well as real-time pipeline. And we have, what we do is like on the batch side, we do this cleaning process a lot. So basically whenever there is an event which comes into on real-time side, we have very less time to actually use that, process that, and pass it along to our system. So on the cleaning side, we don't do like we do basic sanitization and validation whenever a particular event comes in. But apart from that, we do most of these linkings as well, like how much there's a probability that a particular ID is linked to another ID. So there has to be some probability associated with it, right? So basically these things we take care on the batch side, where we can take more time and be more efficient and be, more correct actually. So that we do this on batch side, and whenever there is some discrepancy between batch and real time, we can push those events back into real time side to make changes if there is something different which it should not be.
Okay, thank you. Because let me ask you the same question basically that I asked Navinder a bit ago about what impact the COVID-19 has had on your customer base.
Yeah, so two things that we are seeing as a trend on that side, right? One, obviously the movement to cloud is accelerating.
Okay.
So while people still want the hybrid bit, the focus on the cloud data warehouse aspect has increased a lot more. The other bit that we're seeing in terms of trend is that the focus on the TCO aspect, right, is now a lot more significant. Before we used to talk TCO, and people would be like, "Yep, let's talk performance, let's talk hybrid, let's talk how you make all of that happen." Now they actually want to know, okay, you're saying you can cut it by 50%. Let's
now put it to the test. Make sure you're true.
Show me how you will really do it, and how do you guarantee that? And the interest level in that aspect of the campaign has gone up a lot more in the last. And I would say this is the last 2 months aspect.
So it concentrated people's attention on that.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
But I would say cloud is definitely benefiting from the whole.
Cloud is benefiting from it. Okay.
Yeah.
Good information. All right. Well, thank you to.
Just one more thing. I put a link out there to our live demos that happen every Thursday into the chat box here.
Okay.
And that's essentially just anyone can just register over there and go for that. What I'll also, I've asked our team to send me a link to a Vimeo thing. Okay, I just got it. Okay, I'm going to
just put it in the chat box, and then we'll get it to out to all the attendees. Absolutely.